everybody. Welcome to Equilibrium Collective. I'll say hello again because I started it a bit too early. But yeah, welcome to Equilibrium, everybody. I'm Laura-Jayne. This is my co-host, Jess.
Hi,
Jess. I promise I'm going to break her in gently, nice and easy tonight. It's the first time going live. But how are you, Jess? How you been?
Yeah, all good. A little bit nervous. First time, so fingers crossed everything goes well.
I will. Like I said, nothing ever goes. Everything. We always get technical issues here. Like we already had a few to start with. Mean a way to start to go on. Obviously, we've got a really good interview tonight. We have Todd Neiss, who's a Sasquatch researcher for, I believe, 27 to 28 years now. He's been doing it, maybe longer. I could be completely wrong. But obviously, we're going to talk to him and about all this research and how he got himself into it. I mean, I ain't going to ask you, Jess, because no one knows anything about you apart from what you do with your TikTok, which, by the way, your TikTok videos are amazing.
Thank you.
So go on, let everyone know a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, I don't know where to start. Obviously, if you've seen my TikToks, I do a lot of tarot readings. I also run my own little business where I make things like, I'll show you, all to do with like crystals and things. So we've got like little crystal hangings and things like that, lots of jewelry. So yeah, that's basically me. Like I'm into all the mystical, magical things, lots of witchy stuff. Yes. I love all the witchy stuff. I don't like, it's the ones that Kerry and Sarah do, the witchy ones, their lives that they do. They get so emotional. I don't know how they do it. Like, hats off to them.
I know it is.
I get sitting there in bits crying.
I'm normally monitoring them going, no, I won't say it because Kerry, I'm going to see Kerry and Sarah now in my head going, don't you dare say it, Laura. So I'm not. But they know what I'm talking about. I get very heated as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, less than that. I ain't gonna say no more on that subject because I can see Kerry and Sarah now. Don't you dare. But we are now going to welcome the lovely Todd Neiss to our show. Oh, is he coming?
There he is.
Hello, Todd.
Hi, Todd.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. It's great to be with you, and I appreciate you having me on.
No, we appreciate you coming to join us. Absolutely, it's our pleasure to have you here. Obviously, we're gonna kick off to begin with. Like, how did you initially get into being a researcher for Sasquatch?
Well, my baptism into Bigfooting, it was rather abrupt, to say the least. I, you know, having lived here in the Pacific Northwest all my life, you can't help but hear the stories of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but I never put any credence into it, and just kind of wrote it off as a good campfire story, you know, to scare the kids or whatnot. But, you know, I've spent a lot of years out in the woods hunting and fishing and whatnot. But that all came to a sudden, I'd say halt, but I should say start, I guess, because my initiation came on April 3rd of 1993. At the time, I was a combat engineer in the Oregon Army National Guard. And for those of you that don't know, a big part of what we do as combat engineers involves explosives. And so on this particular day, beautiful day in the Coast Range in April, we set out to do 3 different explosives at 3 different rock quarries or gravel quarries on some private timberland. And we had done the first 2 blasts, and we're at the 3rd and final gravel quarry, and had set a cratering charge, which consisted of I don't know, 250 pounds of ammonium nitrate. And this was to simulate blowing a road in half. Anyhow, we got the charges set, and we initiated the fuses, and we had about 11 minutes or so to get out of there, get down to our safety area, where we would wait for the explosion and then go back and check our work. So our standard operating procedure, obviously, was to get in the vehicles and get the heck out of there as quick as we can. In this case, we had 4 vehicles, 2 Humvees up front, a troop transport in the middle, and in the back, following up, the commander in his Humvee. I was a passenger in the second Humvee, sitting behind the driver, and being a beautiful day, I just naturally had the window open and my arm resting on the sill, and I'm just naturally looking about the countryside for any signs of deer or elk or what have you, wildlife in general. And well, I got a little more than I bargained for. We rounded this corner on our way down to this staging area, and all of a sudden the second quarry came into view. And what struck me was I looked down there, and here's 3 very huge dark figures standing right out open in the pit, the gravel pit, with no trees or any sort of backdrop behind them to obscure them. I mean, just right out in the open. And my first thought was, oh my God, what are those people doing down there? Because it's based on the the dangerousness of what we do. Everybody has to be accounted for. But I hardly got the thought out of my head. It's like, what the heck are those? What the heck are those? And the more I looked, the more I realized I wasn't looking at humans. So, certainly what I saw, and these were front views, these 3 beings, if you will, were all standing up, facing our convoy and watching, obviously observing us as we headed away from this pending explosion. And, there was no question they weren't human. Sure, they were standing up on 2 legs, and they had 2 arms and shoulder, head, torso, all that. But something was wrong. I mean, the arms reached well below their knees, almost like halfway to their feet. Even the legs seemed disproportionately too long, and these things were built like bodybuilders. I mean, all 3 of them were just massive. The one in the center stood a full head taller than those on either side of it, but I estimated the one in the middle to be roughly 9 feet in height, and the other 2 7 to 7.5 feet high. And what really struck me was that while that one in the middle stood there like a statue and just didn't move at all, the 2, I hate to use the word shorter, but the 2 either side of it were displaying this odd behavior of swaying back and forth. Now, like the shifting weight from one foot to the other, and in the process rocking back and forth. And this wasn't like a 2 or 3 second something ran across the road in front of the car, and I think it was a Bigfoot or anything. I watched them for a full 25 seconds. And while that doesn't sound like very long, look at your watch for 25 seconds and imagine seeing what I was witnessing. And I just, there's this initial denial mentally, I guess, where you're trying to rationalize what you're seeing, and then eventually you have no choice but to accept what you're seeing is what it is. And at that, I was just in shock, and I didn't want to take my eyes off them because I was afraid if I turned even to say something to the driver or the co-driver that I would turn back and they'd be gone. So I was just transfixed on what I was seeing. So, about 25 seconds went by and we rounded a corner and we were getting close to the staging area. And I just fell back into my seat and tried to make sense of it. I was pretty much in a state of shock. I mean, to think that all these thoughts swimming in your head, these things do exist. These things have been out there the entire time I'd been out there hunting and fishing and whatnot. I mean, this was my main area. And to think that just to fathom that they had been out there that entire time, and I was completely unaware of it. But again, I went from a very, shall we say, agnostic sort of attitude about these things to, this was definitely an epitome, life-changing for me. And it just, to this day, amazes me how 25 seconds has really changed the last 28 plus years of my life, and it's affected it in almost every way you can imagine. But just as a follow-up, an interesting follow-up to that was when we did get down to the staging area, I jumped out of the Humvee and just instinctively jogged back up in the direction we had just come from in hopes of being able to get another view. Unfortunately, but I went as far as I dared, again, with that 100% integrity where everybody's accounted for. It would be a big no-no for me to disappear out of sight to get, to where I needed to be. But while I'm standing there, my arm and, to my forehead, I'm on my tiptoes. I'm straining to see these things again. I heard somebody call out my name. And I looked over to my right, and my friend Sergeant Martins was coming up toward me, and he says, "Hey, what are you looking at?" And I dropped my hand to my side. I said, "Well, nothing." And he proceeded to come up to where I was at, and he looked me right in the eyes, and he said, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at the second blast site." And I'm like, oh boy. But
wow.
I just, being me, I said, I don't know, Jeff, what did you see? I wasn't going to be the first one to admit it. And, I'm on pins and needles, and he looks to his left and his right to make sure nobody else is in earshot. And he says, I saw 3 huge hair-covered Bigfoot, I guess. And of course, with that, then I'm like, yeah, I saw him too, and, it was kind of nice to have the corroboration. I certainly didn't need it. I, to this day, cannot unsee what I saw, but it was kind of cool to know somebody else had shared that experience. And being in a traditional guardsman role, at least over here in the States, we train 1 week in the month, and we have our, Monday through Friday jobs. And, so the next month, interestingly enough, 2 more soldiers came forward, and also independent of each other, by the way, and they confirmed that they had seen these 3 creatures as well. So it's a very unique sighting, I guess, in respect that multiple animal sightings are fairly rare. Usually it's a single being. Multiple eyewitnesses of multiple animals, very rare, and obviously the nature of what we were doing out there, which was blowing up their forest, all that combines to make it a very interesting story. And I'll tell you, I've been hooked ever since.
I mean, that is amazing.
Yeah.
I think the good thing with that is the fact that it was, like you said, you didn't need it to be corroborated, but that you wasn't the only one that saw the 3 Sasquatch.
I feel like I would be going crazy if it was just me that saw it, but knowing that someone else saw it too, it would just confirm, no, you're not going mad. You see what you saw.
Well, I've interviewed hundreds of eyewitnesses over the years, and there seems to be a pattern, if you will. Seeing something like that really traumatizes you. It traumatizes, you're very conscious as far as how you go forward and view things in a whole different light, especially going out in the woods. And I think back as far as all the times I've been out there, and going out now again with eyes wide open, you tend to see quite a bit of evidence. But it just made me think how many times I was out there without that perspective and would probably walk by many different signs that, if you're not in that mind frame, you just dismiss as, an odd shaped divot in the ground or some strange odd noises or vocalizations that you try to attribute to something else. But once, you're quote unquote enlightened, I guess, you tend to view life, not just them, but life in general with a much more open mind. And in interviewing other people, it's interesting the things we have in common, and that trauma being part of it. I mean, when I talk about, I see a pattern, if you will, as far as, like I say, this process of denial, this initial denial. You're trying to mentally, it's like that can't be what it appears to be. Is it, I don't know what else it could be. Or these three black bears standing up all at the same time, next to each other, and oh look, they're swinging their arms are too long. The whole thing. It's a very rapid succession psychologically. Yeah. But it's interesting with what we have in common. That I don't know. I'll put it this way: for a researcher who's never had that experience, who goes to interview somebody who has, it's a whole nother game when somebody who has had that experience does the same, because and when I talk to people and I know where they're going with their story, it's like, before we even go anywhere, before you even say anything, let me tell you my story. And you just see this person open up in ways they just wouldn't with somebody that, because in the back of their mind, they're saying they probably think I'm nuts, but I'm just, versus, hey, here's somebody that's shared that. So, but anyway, it's again, it's just been a wild, wonderful trip for me, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like she's saying, it's just amazing to think that it's been to witness them three, to see three Bigfoot. I mean, that just the things going through your mind. I mean, it must have been amazement, like you said, shock. I mean, you can imagine the amount of emotions that are probably going through people's heads that have witnessed this.
Well, yes, it amazes me how many people out there who haven't witnessed it are staunch believers in it. Again, I was agnostic about the whole thing. I couldn't care either way, but I didn't really put any truth into it until the truth smacked me right upside the head, and there you go. It's like,
you got no choice.
How do you like me now? I was like, you don't find Bigfoot. Bigfoot finds you. And, it's amazing how many people are going out there, really around the world in certain places, because there seems to be similar creatures, beings in various remote locations around the world. But, my main focus is here in North America. But, yeah, it's an interesting club to to belong to. But it's funny how most of these people going out they're not the ones that are reporting these things. It's usually people going, oh, completely out of the blue, something happens, and 90% of the time it's not, you're not going to sneak up on these things, they have excellent vision and hearing and smell, and you're in their territory. And let's face it, humans are probably some of the smelliest things out there, So, they see you coming normally. It's very rare somebody, gets up on one without their knowing that you're watching them. It's generally just the opposite. People realize something's out there, something's watching me. Oh, what's that out there? And the lion's share of encounters are like mine. They're accidental, if you will.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop us from trying, over the years.
No.
With the, the upgrades in technology, it's changed a lot in 28 years. And so the technology gets passed down to us civilians, and the prices seem to get better. And so we've got, some new toys to bring to the game, and new methods. And, of course, we use, contemporary methods like what you'd do if you were out hunting deer or bear or elk or what have you. But then there's some unconventional things that we try as well. I mean, why not?
Anything to try, and like you say, but I mean, how do you feel like if, to say, someone was to catch Sasquatch and Bigfoot? I mean, personally, I'd feel like they would be tested on. I like them to be kept a secret, like no one really knows about, without being, they're not being found. I like knowing that they're there, but no one truly knowing that they're there, if you know what I mean.
I totally understand your perspective, and I was there myself at one point. But one of the reasons I think that could be a little misguided. I mean, it's kind of a fantasy point of view that they're perfectly fine without us. They've lived here long before we have, and they'll probably be here long after we are. But, however, looking at this in terms from a biological standpoint, I don't think it can be argued that these things are quite rare. Yeah. People can argue all the time about, how come we haven't found a body, or where's the proof, where's the beef? But it's like, it comes down to odds. And with that, in respect, how do we know that their species, the health of their species at all, really? I mean, do we know how many there are today? We can only guess. Some will estimate 2,000. Well, just in my research area, the Cascade Mountain Range, which is where I live, east of Portland, and the Coast Range comprise over 60 million square miles, and most of it is uninhabited. Very rough terrain, heavy cover, and 2,000 of anything, when you spread them out between Northern California and British Columbia, even on into Alaska, is really nothing. And so the odds of even running into one, let alone finding any bones or carcass, if you will, is pretty rare. It takes a great effort to get out there and be really vigilant to find anything. But it's the evidence is out there. But again, let's say we know there's 2,000 today. Can you tell me how many there were 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago? Is their population increasing? Is it decreasing? I mean, when it comes to conserving and monitoring species, one doesn't have to become the last of the species to die out to make that species extinct. In fact, it's a known fact that once there are numbers of any species, and I'm not just talking the Bigfoot, but once any species gets below a couple hundred in existence, that's a problem, because you've got basically a time bomb there. You've got a virtual extinction, if you will. The gene pool becomes too small to sustain the species, and that can lead to all kinds of issues with genetic problems and immune problems and whatnot with, again, any animal. What is their territory? I mean, what is the habitat required for a single individual?
Yeah.
I've heard scientists say, based on the extrapolations, say from the mountain gorilla or whatnot, the caloric intake for one of these could be 6,000-7,000 calories a day. So they're probably just eating machines from the time they get up until they go to sleep. And so what are the resources that they need? Is there certain enzymes they need, for instance, from the root of a skunk cabbage or what have you? And you start getting into that sort of minutia, and you're like, okay, now we got to look at what they eat and what's the status of that particular food source, and things like that. So, one of the reasons I founded the American Primate Conservancy back in 2015 was to bring their situation, such as we know it, into light, for people to at least consider that. Again, I understand, hey, leave them alone, they're fine, they'll do good without us. I'm sure they said that about the carrier pigeon at one time, and they're gone. They said that about, if you really research extinction, just in the last 100 years, we know of a number of animals that just either out of ignorance or what have you, that just nobody bothered to really ask those questions until it was too late. So the American Primate Conservancy, our mission statement is the discovery, research, data, the fourth stage being the most difficult, and that's official recognition by the scientific community, because the last stage is protection. And I'd rather err on the side of caution and assume, until we do know the right answers, that these things may very well be in a jeopardy as far as their species is concerned. So why not? But until we can get them scientifically accepted, those protections are not going to happen. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah. Is there anything you wanted to say, Jess?
I'm really good with the listening, but no, I've heard a lot of stories, and lately I've been watching there's something on Discovery Plus, These Woods Are Haunted, I believe it's called, and in there is a lot of claims of people being in the woods and coming across, again, a single Bigfoot rather than three. So it's the first time I've come across like an eyewitness that's seen three. So quite amazed by that.
Well, I appreciate the chance to be able to get the information out, and my hope is that with all the different independent groups out there, that we can stop acting like we're in competition and start sharing the data that we have. And I've been working in a number of projects to do just that. One group that I'm part of is called Project Zoo Book, where we're actually, and this happened accidentally, really, but we met some, certified zoologists, more specifically those that work with primates. And it was just happenstance the subject of Bigfoot came up, and we were amazed how interested they were in it, and they had been for some time. And so what we've done is we meet regularly via Skype or what have you, and talk about what it's going to take to elevate to scientific standards the subject of Bigfoot to where it's more acceptable. And in doing so, you really have to treat it like any other rare species. You should be able to put together a scientific paper and just black out the word Bigfoot and put spotted black frog or what have you, and it should read the same, as long as we're using their format. And when I say their, I mean scientific format. Then, how can they ignore it? But, I understand too that scientists' reputations are really valuable to them. People that, step on that third rail of Bigfoot run the risk of losing tenure or losing jobs, university jobs or government jobs. So, there's very few scientists that'll step out like that, although I've known a lot. And ironically, a lot of them, once they've retired, go figure. But another group that I helped put together is called SHARE, and that's what do we call it? Sasquatch Hunters Sasquatch Hunters Academic Research Exchange, and it's just like what it sounds. It's and some people get wrapped around the word hunting. I don't. People hunt for jobs. They hunt for keys. They hunt for that missing one sock in the dryer, kind of thing. So hunting does not necessarily denote it. It's just searching. But anyway, it works with the word share, so we ran with it. But there again, this particular group, we are putting together SOPs, standard operating procedures, at academic levels. On, I think we're up to like 37 or 38 different SOPs that we're in the process of writing, and this is just a format, say track casting, or drone piloting or evidence collecting or what have you, and try to put it in a standardized format that's acceptable to science. And, we want to bridge that gap between amateur researcher and the scientific community. And the only way we're going to do that is to elevate the amateur to the scientist level. We're not, the scientific community is not going to lower themselves to, our amateur, ways. So those are two different groups that are kind of working in the background. The zoologists obviously want to remain anonymous. They like their jobs. But no, it's long overdue. We need to get everybody to step up their game, to start cooperating, to share information, to treat this like any other rare species, and put aside the competition part of it. And I hate to say it, but you probably get the same thing in the paranormal field, where we have what we call Bigfoot politics, where people just can't help themselves, and there's a lot of infighting and whatnot.
Oh, yes.
Am I right?
So, yes, you're definitely right.
So anyhow, that's what really led me to put together a very unique gathering of researchers, which began back in 2008. I I was standing there one day. I had been researching by that time, you know, a good 15 years, and I'm thinking, you know, why do these people whom I like and appreciate, who I think are doing good works, and these people over here who are I like and they're doing, you know, the same thing, why do they not get along? Why do they not share things? Why do they have this personal animus between them? And I thought, what would it be like? All these different authors, published authors, PhDs, you know, hardcore researchers, and you know, what would it be like to get them all locked in one room at one time? You know, and just what a brain trust that would be. You know, literally, you know, combined 200 plus years of research experience. You know, and then I just took it a step further, and I said, I know it would be better than to have them all in one room, and that's to have them all in a casual outdoor setting around a bonfire with an adult beverage in their hand, and force them to basically live together for 4 days and 3 nights and really get to know each other on a personal level. And hopefully that'll, you know, break that, that concept of competition. And it's really over the years has taken on a life of its own. This year we'll be celebrating our 14th year. You know, what started out as, you know, just a concept of getting these guys together and getting them to share their research. This is not open to the public, by the way. It's private invitation only, researchers only. And, we limit it to 100 people. We've got a 10-acre private campground that we rent, and it's been fascinating to see it grow over the years. We've had researchers come from as far away as Australia, England, Russia, New Zealand, and all across the U.S. and Canada, and they come at their own expense. They come at their own expense. Who do we have from England? We had Matthew Hill, who's with the BBC, came out, and that was fantastic. We kind of worked him into the guest speaker list, and amazing. A lot of the things just happen on their own. Things that we don't plan on. But it's a great time. We're gearing up to do it here in a couple of weeks, and looking forward to getting back to the hopefully post-COVID mentality. And last year we had a very abbreviated, watered down version because we could only have 25 people, and heck, half of those were organizers and speakers. So I think there were like 12 people putting it together and about 12 people in the audience. But I mean, we've passed that now, and we've been approved for 100, and just we have fun. People bring. My favorite part, to be honest with you, I mean, the speakers are great, and pretty much everybody who's anybody in the Bigfoot field has been there. Very, very famous people in the field, but it's the bonfires that I enjoy every night. We have huge bonfires, and this is where people get to let their hair down, and people bring guitars and native drums and harmonicas, and
sounds good.
Heck, you never know. It's always different every year.
Sounds like my type of night.
We'd love to have you. I tell you, if you guys really want a good flavor of Beachfoot, I would encourage your listeners to, if you go to YouTube, a friend of mine put together a 10th anniversary special on Beachfoot, and you know, I tell people bring popcorn and tissue, because you'll be laughing and crying over, you know, the course of watching it, but you see how personal it is, and how people really, you know, bond with each other there, and by the time it's over, nobody wants to leave, but it's a lot of fun, but it's been productive, and so those are some of the things we're doing. my contribution anyway.
I mean, that is absolutely amazing. I know we have so many people asking
We
questions.
do. We've had lots of questions.
Loads of
Let's hear
people.
Tell me my buddy Thomas Finley's out there.
But I mean, the first one, I mean, another one was, I mean, why are there so many different names like Sasquatch, Bigfoot? Like, is it a cultural thing or?
Oh yeah, it's a good question. You know, the term Bigfoot didn't even exist prior to 1958, and it was coined by some a road building crew in Northern California who kept finding these tracks and eventually started casting them and brought them down to show to the newspaper, and boom, Bigfoot. The name Bigfoot, you know, corny as it is, it's apt, I suppose. Sasquatch is a term. It was kind of mispronounced by a missionary in British Columbia who had discussed this with the natives up there. I believe it was Salish tribe. I could be wrong, but they called it, I believe, Sasquatch. And this missionary kind of changed it up to Sasquatch, and it stuck. But if you look into Native American history, and this is something I'm very interested in and focused on, and I'm dealing with a number of tribes to get to the bottom of this, because, well, I digress. There are so many names. And nearly every tribe in the United States has a different name, a traditional name for these things that describe the exact same creatures. There's Desanaqua and Bakwas and Itztiaha and Oma, and that's just in the Pacific Northwest. Skookum. You know, when I first had my sighting, I initially I made a rush to the library and checked out these books on the subject I had no interest in prior to the sighting. And I can't remember the last time I had been in a library, but I checked out every book on the subject that I could. I wanted to know the latest, greatest, newest, you know, most up-to-date information on these things. And it took me about 6 months once I digested these books to kind of have another epiphany, and that's, okay, so us Europeans, we've been here 300 years here in the States, roughly, maybe not even that long on the West Coast. And they've been here now. I think we've established Native American presence here on the West Coast, certainly as far back as 19,000 years now. And that just recently came to light. So, you know, you put it on a scale, it's like, let's see, 300 years, 19,000 years. Who do you think's got a little more knowledge about this, us or the Native Americans or First Nations people or whoever you want? You know, obviously they've had to live symbiotically with these things throughout millennia, really. And it's interesting to hear their take on things and how they respected each other and gave each other space. And in fact, there's a lot of areas around the Pacific Northwest that have a geographic name that includes Skookum. And Skookum was a name given to them in the Chinook native jargon. And you've got Skookum Falls, Skookum Meadows, Skookum Mountain, Skookum Creek, Skookum River, whatever. And there's still, like, I believe 43 geographic name places around the Pacific Northwest that still have that moniker. And wherever they attach that name, and it certainly wasn't done by Europeans, wherever that name was attached, it basically was a no trespassing sign to the natives. It was like, this is their territory, and they pretty much, you stay out of it. of course, there was a whole lot more real estate to go around back then as well. So, and then that's a concern too, that as we encroach more and more into the wilderness, expanding civilization, if you want to call it that, it's certainly got to be putting pressure on them, and so again, just another aspect that we need to keep our eyes on. But yeah, all those names, and around the world, you know, in China, you've got the Yeren, which is their word for hairy man. In Russia, you've got the Almas or the Almasti. You've got the Orang Pendek, now that's been proven pretty much down in Sumatra. Australia's got the Yowie. So, I mean, you're going to find different names. Many of them originated through, you know, native culture. But, yeah, it's kind of fascinating as you get into it. I mean, it's really difficult to do research going back hundreds of years when most of these tribes had no written language. And it all gets passed down from elder to elder. And but again, their history, their culture is very important to them, and they keep it, you know, pretty succinct and detailed. And it's not like you can run to a bookstore and get that information. You've got to, you know, get out there and meet them. And I just returned, for instance, from an investigation in Nebraska, of all places. I was invited to do some research on the Omaha Reservation, which was absolutely mind-blowing. One of the most amazing investigations I'm still trying to wrap my head around what I saw. But there they call it Satanga, and they've called it that for a long time. So I keep finding different words to describe them. But anyway, it's fascinating.
It is completely fascinating. I'm absolutely engrossed in this listening. I've got to remember now I'm interviewing. I'm getting so engrossed.
So any of your listeners have any questions we can
I have so many. Right, I've got another one up there.
Close your eyes and
pick one. Okay, right. Okay, right. Got one from Simon. If Bigfoot stories started in the US, given that different countries have a body of water separating them, how do you think that Bigfoots have got to these different countries?
Well, that's a good question. Appreciate that, Simon. There's a lot of theories about that. Obviously, we got to, you know, put ourselves in a time machine, and so much of it is just speculation. But we can look at fossil records, for instance, of other animals and how they were disseminated over the years. People would probably find it hard to believe that the United States used to have camels, for instance, back in the Pleistocene era. We had a species of beaver that was the size of black bear, saber-toothed cats, and mammoth and mastodon. They're digging up Tyrannosaurus rex skeletons in Texas and Montana. It's just, but you know, so are they related? Probably on an evolutionary scale, yes, but again, where did they diverge? And you know, you have divergent evolution, you have concurrent evolution. You know, where, you know, people say, "Oh, humans came from monkeys." It's okay. How come we still have monkeys today if we are the prodigy of them? You know, there's species that can live simultaneously. And really, in the case of humans, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but in the case of humans, we started out divergent, coming out of supposedly Africa or Middle East, what have you. So we diverged and formed different sub-races, which then lived, that process kind of plateaued, and we've lived parallel, in a parallel evolution for a long time. And what's interesting with the human race is now with the advent of modern science and technology and transportation, where I can be anywhere in the world within 24 hours, we're now getting that, that interracial blood gene pool out there, to where, ironically, the human race is now on a convergence, if you will, probably back eventually to pretty much a single race within a few hundred years. So these things probably are similar. I think at this point they've diverged from, people talk about things like Pangea, where all the continents were kind of all together at one time and then they floated apart, and there's some evidence to back that up. We look at Beringia, which is the land bridge between what's now Russia and the United States, Alaska. That Bering Strait used to be a land bridge, so we know that there was a lot of migration back then. And so there's various ways that different species can become separated, and therefore they have different characteristics. I mean, what we see in the Yowie or the Yeti, for instance, in the Himalayas, these are similar to Bigfoot, but they're 5 feet on the average.
Yeah.
The orang pendek is even shorter than that in Sumatra. And let's look at, what they just discovered less than a dozen years ago on the island of Flores in Indonesia. And that's these hobbit people, they like to, they call them. They're scientifically known as Homo florensis. They found a whole race of hominids that at full height, they were very much like humans, but at full height, they were 3.5 feet at most. And they found one, and now they found dozens of them, and they seem to be just specific to that island. And whereas they thought they were hundreds of thousands of years old or had been extinct for 100,000 of years, they're now going back and saying, you know what, more carbon dating showing more like 15,000 years. So imagine, if you will, these hobbits, if you want to call them that, were alive and kicking at the same time the Native Americans were existing here in North America. So there's, just like humans and hominids, these creatures, which may be hominid, to be honest with you, they've gotten dispersed and more than likely isolated at this stage. So I guess the good news in that is we do have separate breeding populations of these things around the world, and perhaps if one were to be in trouble of extinction, there's others that might be able to carry that on. But no, that's a good question. I can't account for, really, other than speculation, how they've gotten distributed or dispersed around the world, and if we're really even talking about the same thing or something like it. Mm-hmm. But I will say this about the Native Americans and my research. It's very interesting in their traditions, in their culture. They'll talk about different animals, deer, elk, bear, snake, coyote, frogs, turtles, whatever, in a completely different way than they do these things. In fact, they actually consider them an ancient tribe in and of themselves. They refer to them as the old ones or the first ones, in an effort to describe they were here before we got here, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, I used to subscribe to the theory that Bigfoot may have been a relative to what they call the Gigantopithecus in Asia. And I find that whole historical trend not to pan out as far as making a survival to the U.S. Based on what their diets were and what they would be lacking in the process. But I'm more now leaning toward what we're dealing with is an ancient hominid or relic hominid species that just happen to survive to this day and continue to do so in very limited numbers and in very remote locations.
That is, yeah. It's so interesting hearing. Like I've honestly not heard of quite a lot of these, especially about the native native Indians and about their take on being the old ones. And I mean, I didn't even know that. So I've learned something new.
Yeah.
Well, good. I will, I'm going to put a plug in for a friend of mine who published a book that literally saved me 10 years of research. This book, and I probably don't have it here, but in my office, but it's written by a gentleman named Leon Faller, Phaller, and this guy did some amazing research, really addressing nearly every tribe in North America and finding historical traditional lore from every one of these tribes. I mean, there's hundreds of tribes, and ironic how all of them describe the same thing in different ways, but physically the same, and also their character and their interaction with them. But it's an amazing piece of work if you can get your hands on it. I think it's on Amazon, and I would, damn, it's killing me. I don't think I have one here in my office, but if you look up Leon, Leon Faller, Phaller, it'll pop up there on Amazon. It's basically research on Native American interaction with Bigfoot, Sasquatch, something of that nature. But amazing book, and it'll open your eyes. It really will.
I'm definitely going to give that a read. I'm going to look that up when we finish this
written
live.
Down.
Oh, you wrote it down? I'm going to help you, Jess.
Yeah, well, he's a starving author, so please help him out. Let's all pitch in. No, but it's definitely worth the read.
Oh, Sarah just joined us. No,
Oh,
she's gone.
Oh my gosh, she's more elusive than Bigfoot.
Yeah.
You don't know what she looks like.
I think I might have seen her once.
Well, I happen to have a picture that she sent me earlier, so that'll teach her.
Oh.
You better get on here and correct that, Sarah. She's telling me online, oh, I can't wait to meet you. It's like she's hiding.
Literally, that's me in the morning when I wake up.
Oh dear.
Well, it's kind of late over there for you guys, isn't it?
It is. We're just about to close up now. I didn't realise the time. It's 9:30, so I think that's what Sarah was doing, like, guys.
Yeah.
But I just want to say a massive, massive thank you to you, Todd, for coming on and just sharing your experience, your knowledge. It's absolutely incredible.
It's been amazing to listen to your stories.
Well,
absolutely, I'm honoured to have you here.
Yeah.
Well, I hope your audience enjoyed it, and I appreciate the questions, and I hope I didn't jabber on too much.
No, it's normally me, so it makes a change.
I think from someone else for a change, Laura.
I've got
well,
to be
we'll have
quiet.
to do this again
sometime,
right?
I would love to do this again sometime, you Todd. I honestly really enjoyed it. I want to say thank you to all our viewers as well. We really appreciate you joining in. Thank you for the questions. Also, I want to thank you, Jess, first time. Well done.
Thank you for having me.
You did amazing.
Well done. Well done.
You did it. You did really good. And also remember, we are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. You can check out Jess on a TikTok video she does.
Yeah.
We're still doing our cryptos, aren't we?
Yeah, I will be doing another episode of Cryptids. Obviously, I wasn't meant to be on this evening, but I am just filling in for Terry. So I was going to be doing another one this evening, but I'll be doing it tomorrow. So I'm not going to tell anyone what it is yet. You're going to have to watch.
I love your videos. Are so good.
I'll look forward to it.
Oh, she does such good TikTok videos. So if you haven't already, please subscribe, share. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Say good night from me and from Jess. It'll be good afternoon for you, won't it, Todd?
Right. Yeah. Time for lunch.
Good night for us. Well, thank you, everybody. And you can see Jess. Well, no, it won't. It'll be Sarah and Kerry next week.
It is Sarah and Kerry,
thank you, everybody.
Let's do it again.
I'll definitely do it again, Todd. Thank you.